Steel doors slide open with mechanical precision. Guards move without speaking, escorting prisoners through narrow concrete corridors where light barely enters. These men are not serving time for ordinary crimes. They are mass killers, domestic terrorists, and ideologically driven attackers whose actions left permanent scars on American history. Since 1927, the United States federal government has carried out more than 50 executions. Federal death row is different from state systems. It exists for crimes that cross borders, target entire communities, or threaten national stability. The inmates held under federal authority represent some of the most extreme cases the justice system has ever confronted. At the center of this system are facilities designed for total control. One of the most infamous is the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility in Florence, Colorado. Known as ADX Florence, it is often described as the most secure prison in the world. Some of the most dangerous federal inmates, including those sentenced to death, are held under conditions of near-total isolation. Prisoners can spend up to 23 hours a day alone in concrete cells, with meals passed through slots and minimal human contact. This series examines some of the most dangerous individuals currently awaiting execution under federal authority. Their crimes differ in method and motive, but all share one common element: extreme violence fueled by ideology, hatred, or radical belief. The first case begins with a name that became synonymous with terror in April 2013. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev was just 19 years old when his life took a dark and irreversible turn. Born outside the United States, he later became a naturalized citizen and enrolled in college. To classmates and friends, he appeared ordinary, soft-spoken, social, and academically focused. Nothing about his outward behavior suggested what was unfolding behind closed doors. On April 15, 2013, thousands gathered in Boston for the annual Boston Marathon. The mood was celebratory. Families lined the streets. Runners pushed toward the finish line. Then, in an instant, 2 homemade explosive devices detonated near Boylston Street within seconds of each other. The explosions killed 3 people and injured more than 260 others. Many victims lost limbs. Others suffered permanent physical and psychological trauma. Chaos erupted as emergency responders rushed toward smoke-filled streets filled with screaming spectators. Among those killed was an 8-year-old child attending the race with his family, a young woman working in the restaurant industry, and an international graduate student. Their deaths stunned the nation. As authorities struggled to understand what had happened, Boston was placed under lockdown. Public transportation shut down. Residents were ordered indoors. Law enforcement agencies launched a massive investigation. Meanwhile, Tsarnaev returned to his university dorm. Witnesses later reported that he socialized, visited the gym, and behaved calmly in the hours following the attack. Investigators later noted online activity that appeared designed to make him seem detached from the violence unfolding around him. When surveillance images of 2 suspects were released days later, the situation escalated rapidly. Tsarnaev and his older brother fled, triggering a violent chain of events that would leave a police officer dead and one brother fatally wounded. The city was now in full crisis mode. But the most chilling chapter had not yet unfolded, because Tsarnaev was still free, and the manhunt was about to push an entire city to its breaking point. Once surveillance images of the 2 suspects were released to the public, the investigation moved at terrifying speed. The faces were everywhere: television screens, newspapers, phones, and social media feeds. Boston instantly became a city on edge. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev and his older brother realized their anonymity was gone. That night, they gathered remaining weapons and explosives and fled. What followed was not a quiet escape attempt, but a rapid escalation into open violence. Their next move brought them to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. There, they approached a campus police officer sitting alone in his patrol car. Without hesitation, the officer was shot and killed in an attempt to steal his service weapon. The murder added another victim to an already devastating attack and confirmed that the suspects were prepared to kill again. The brothers then carjacked a vehicle, forcing the driver to withdraw cash from an ATM while they sat in the back seat. During the ride, the driver overheard them discussing the marathon bombing. Realizing the danger he was in, he seized an opportunity to escape at a gas station, ran inside, and contacted police. Authorities now had confirmation that the suspects were heavily armed and mobile. Police tracked the stolen vehicle, leading to a violent confrontation in a residential neighborhood. Gunfire erupted as officers attempted to stop them. Homemade explosives were thrown. A high-speed chase followed, putting civilians and officers in immediate danger. During the chaos, Tsarnaev's older brother was critically injured. As police closed in, he was run over during an escape attempt and later pronounced dead at the hospital. Despite suffering injuries of his own, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev managed to escape on foot. Boston was immediately placed under lockdown. Public transportation shut down. Businesses closed. Residents were ordered to remain inside as thousands of law enforcement officers conducted door-to-door searches. Armored vehicles rolled through silent streets. Helicopters circled overhead. For hours, the city felt frozen in time. Authorities warned that Tsarnaev was wounded but extremely dangerous. The search ended the following evening in an unexpected place. A homeowner noticed blood on a tarp covering a boat stored in his backyard. Police surrounded the area, unsure whether the suspect was armed or preparing to detonate explosives. After a brief exchange of gunfire, officers exercised restraint. Tsarnaev was pulled from the boat, barely conscious and severely injured. He was transported to a hospital under heavy guard. For days, he could not speak. When questioned, he communicated by writing responses on paper. He admitted his role in the bombing and revealed that the attack was motivated by extremist beliefs. He also disclosed plans for a second attack in New York's Times Square that was never carried out. Federal prosecutors charged him with 30 counts, including the use of a weapon of mass destruction resulting in death. After weeks of testimony, the jury found him guilty on all counts. On June 24, 2015, he was sentenced to death and transferred into federal custody, where years of appeals and legal uncertainty still surround his fate. But terrorism was not the only ideology fueling mass murder, because elsewhere, pure racial hatred was about to turn a place of worship into a killing ground. On the evening of June 17, 2015, members of Emanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church gathered for their weekly Bible study in Charleston, South Carolina. The church was one of the oldest Black congregations in the nation, deeply tied to African American history, faith, and civil rights. That night, a young white man entered the church shortly before the service began. He was welcomed without suspicion. Congregants greeted him kindly and invited him to join the study. For nearly an hour, he sat among them, listening quietly as scripture was discussed. As the session neared its conclusion, during the closing prayer, he stood up. In a sudden eruption of violence, he pulled out a handgun and opened fire. The sanctuary descended into chaos. Worshippers attempted to flee, hide, or shield one another, but the attack was swift and devastating. Within minutes, 9 people were dead. Among them was the church's senior pastor, who also served as a state senator. Others were killed at close range, some while trying to protect fellow congregants. The shooter fled immediately. A multi-state manhunt followed. The next day, a civilian recognized the suspect's vehicle during a traffic stop and alerted authorities. Police arrested him without resistance. During interrogation, he confessed. He openly stated that the attack was racially motivated and rooted in white supremacist ideology. Investigators later uncovered extensive online material, revealing deep hatred and extremist beliefs. What disturbed investigators most was his demeanor. He showed little remorse and appeared emotionally detached, expressing surprise only at the scale of death he had caused. The case moved to federal court, where the shooter chose to represent himself. He refused to present witnesses during sentencing. In January 2017, the jury sentenced him to death. Years later, while many federal death sentences were commuted, his remained unchanged, deemed too ideologically driven and too devastating for mercy. But even this massacre would soon be eclipsed, because 3 years later, another extremist attack would become the deadliest antisemitic, killing in American history. On the morning of October 27, 2018, worshippers gathered at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was Shabbat, a sacred day of prayer. Multiple congregations were present inside the building. Shortly before 9:45 a.m., a heavily armed man entered the synagogue. Gunfire echoed through hallways and prayer rooms. Worshippers ran, hid, or barricaded themselves as the attacker moved methodically through the building. 11 people were killed, making it the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in U.S. history. Several others, including police officers, were wounded. Survivors later testified that the attacker shouted anti-Semitic statements while firing. The attack lasted nearly 20 minutes. Police confronted the shooter in a gun battle. Wounded and unable to continue, he surrendered and was taken into custody alive. Federal prosecutors charged him with 63 counts, including hate crimes resulting in death. During trial, the defense argued mental illness, but expert testimony showed his actions were deliberate and ideologically driven. In June 2023, the jury found him guilty on all counts and unanimously recommended the death penalty. A federal judge formally sentenced him the following day. He became the only person sentenced to death by the federal government during the current administration, reigniting national debate over capital punishment. Today, he remains on federal death row. Appeals continue. No execution date exists. As years pass and executions remain rare, federal death row feels increasingly frozen in time, its purpose unresolved. If executions never come, then what purpose does federal death row truly serve, and is justice being delivered or endlessly delayed?